Okay. Figure I might as well go on ahead and start this. This is the side story, the Royal Academy stories. Solange prologue. Oh my, has the Dronko dormitory closed too? I asked Gundalf upon seeing him in the dining hall. He was the duchy's dormitory supervisor, and it was rare for him to be here so early in the year. The higher population of greater duchies meant their students took several more days to leave than lesser duchies. We closed this afternoon, Gundalf replied. Given how many professors are here, it seems most dormitories are closed already. When the students all returned to their duchies, they brought the servants and chefs who had been working in their dormitories back with them. The dormitories were subsequently closed. Otherwise, the only ones inside would be the knights guarding the teleportation circle, and the supervisors started eating in the dining hall for professors. One could trace the closing of the dormitories by the increasing busyness of the dining hall. It was quite a handful, since many students had no desire to return home, Gundalf continued. I find myself envying how your library is about able to close as soon as classes do. Not quite, I said. There are some who wait until the day their dormitory closed to return their books, and there are some who even visit to study for their remedial classes. The library under my command closed only when I finished all my work following the Archduke Conference. In the past, the overwhelming workload had taken me much too long to complete, but thanks to Schwartz and Weiss's presence this year, it seemed feasible that I might be able to close the library and go to the Sovereignty's Palace Library for the first time in what seemed like forever. I saw Primavera here as well, so am I right to assume Dunkelfelger is the only dormitory that has yet to close? I asked, double-checking that Roffin wasn't coming to the dining hall. Gundalf shook his head. I have heard that, Neuhausen, Losfrenger, and Quantrieb are also keeping their dormitories open due to having students with remedial classes. They may be visiting the library. Oh my, I thank you ever so much for telling me. Neuhausen, Losfrenger, and Quantrieb had dropped to being bottom-ranked duchies after losing the Civil War, and they had neither the manpower nor wealth to dedicate to education. As a result, their grades were decreasing with each passing year, and their students were becoming increasingly more involved in thefts and the disappearance of reading materials. Great. There was often very little I could do about that, but thanks to Lady Rosemite, I could now have Schwartz and Weiss assist in sending out warnings, which was enough to help me manage. This year, every single Ehrenfest student was able to attain better grades, came a voice. I hear that not a single one needed to wait until the date of the final offered exam. I instinctively turned upon hearing someone talk about Ehrenfest, perhaps because I had just been thinking about Lady Rosemine. It appeared that Herscher was talking to other professors of the Scholar course. My sole concern this year was whether Angelica would graduate, but thanks to Lady Rosemine, she graduated without incident, Herscher replied. Any duchies with students taking remedial classes had to keep their dorms open for them, with chefs and servants staying behind as well. This placed a burden on the duchies, so the dormitory supervisors were tasked with doing everything in their power to get these students to pass and return home. Herscher grumbled about one spring several years ago when Angelica had needed to attend remedial classes and the misery she had endured trying to get her through them. Oh, I imagine so. Now I can finally focus on my research, Herscher concluded. Oh, especially considering Angelica graduated this year, so yeah. My, are you not always immersed in your research? Another professor asked, prompting giggles from the others. Perhaps Herscher had already forgotten how she was reprimanded by Prince Anastasius after abandoning her class to research Schwartz and Weiss. Still, you always leap right into your research as soon as your dormitory is closed, the third professor noted. Most dormitory supervisors remain busy until the Archduke Conference is complete. Indeed, most sovereign nobles return to their home duchies in the winter to collect intel. Dormitory supervisors needed to gather information from them to prepare for the Archduke Conference, meaning there were still a variety of small tasks they had to carry out even once the Royal Academy term was over. There was, however, one person who was seemingly exempt from all this. Herscher, who lived in the school building and rarely visited the Ehrenfest dormitory at all. You sure do have it rough, she said. I wish you all well. Herscher, this applies to you too, a male professor said. You should expect there to be a fuss about Lady Rosemine at the next Archduke Conference. Almost certainly, but that has nothing to do with me. I have not heard anything from the OBS, so I'll simply need to perform my research as per usual and wait for the conference to end. And with that, Herscher stood up, having finished her meal. She presumably intended to rush straight back to her laboratory to carry out some more research. I recalled her frequent requests to borrow Schwartz and Weiss from me, although I was unable to agree while their master, Lady Rosemine, was absent. Solange, who sent out the overdue book ordinances this year? The Oswald dormitory supervisor suddenly asked me. Oswald has been very curious. Several other professors immediately glanced over, the supervisors of duchies whose students had received the terrifying reminders from Lord Ferdinand, no doubt. Oh dear, yes. Only duchies that had slacked on returning books knew what we were talking about, meaning the other supervisors and the normal professors were unfamiliar with the ordinances. I received the help of a friendly visitor, I replied. Thanks to them, all the books and documents were returned this year. I am ever so grateful. They did not sound particularly friendly. Oh no! They did not. Oh dear Lord. I was familiar with the message that Lord Ferdinand had spoken into the ordinances, and indeed his voice would send chills down the spine of anyone called by name. Still, I had no intention of revealing his identity. Please remind your students to return their books sooner next year, I said with a smile, evading the question entirely. I then returned to my meal and made my way back to the library once I was finished. Solange is back. Food time is over. I had completely forgotten how heartwarming it was to be welcomed upon returning home. It was thanks to Lady Rosamund that I could once again work with Schwartz and Weiss, and this year's term had given me many very special memories to cherish. You know, Schwartz, Weiss, let's say we reflect on this past year at the Royal Academy together. Okay. Cornelius as a guard knight and a brother. Next is Cornelius, Mother said while overseeing the attendants and servants moving my luggage onto the teleportation circle. I was leaving for the Royal Academy today. Rosamund wasn't here because she was busy with Lord Ferdinand cramming for her upcoming lessons. She had given a sad nod when everyone informed her that she needed to prioritize her own preparations over seeing me off. And now the only ones here were Mother and Eckert. I didn't expect you to come, Eckert, I remarked. I had been certain that he would prioritize guarding Lord Ferdinand, although I didn't voice that thought. Even Father and Lamprecht had stuck to guard duty rather than coming to see me off. I am here only because Lord Ferdinand ordered me to come in Rosamund's place, he replied. So you wouldn't have come otherwise. Yeah, that's the Eckert I'm used to. Yeah, this guy is obsessed. I nodded as explanation, at which point Eckert put on a serious expression and said, From this day forward, you'll be living in the Royal Academy as Rosamund's guard knight. And most importantly, as her brother. Your time there is completely different when your lord or lady is attending, too. Your life begins to center around them. It was an unexpected warning from the man who had just moments ago said that he was only here by order. Yep. I feel that my life already centers around Rosamund, I replied. On the day I had failed to protect her, I had resolved to become stronger than any other guard knight and secure the highest grades I could possibly manage in the Royal Academy. It was fair to say that she was the focus of my life, but despite my protests, Eckert shook his head. No, Ehrenfest and the Royal Academy are two different beasts. Daniel cannot get to the Academy, or go to the Academy, and you're of a higher status than Angelica, so you, her older brother, will be leading her guards. I understand that already. No, you don't. Not in a real sense. Briarda is going to be the only adult retainer you can talk to, and even then, attendants deal with separate work entirely. She won't be able to give advice from the perspective of a knight, and if you absorb her words without considering that, you'll start messing up your duties. Now I was a little worried. I started to contemplate my situation, and Eckert smiled at that. He gave the teleportation circle a nostalgic look, as if reminiscing about the past. Oh yeah, he's probably remembering when he was there with Ferdinand. This is just my own experience, he said, but the more loyally you try to serve your lord or lady in the Royal Academy, the more you'll suffer. It also becomes much easier to slack since you're going to have classes and other excuses available to you. This will be a good opportunity to see just what kind of guard knight you wish to be. You can't rely on your parents at the Academy, so your time there will force you to grow whether you want to or not. He clenched one hand into a tight fist and extended it out to me. Good luck. Yeah, he's gonna need it. I reached out and bumped my fist against his. Apparently the Royal Academy was where guard knights sank or swam, and the intimidating light in Eckert's blue eyes were very firmly urged me toward the latter. Well, no dip. As her older brother, I will strive to be a worthy guard knight, I declared, making a vow between knights. Eckert grinned and took a step back, which prompted Mother to step forward in turn. Rosamund has just awakened from a 2-year slumber, meaning she is emotionally 2 years behind the other students, she said. We have determined that she should attend the Royal Academy now rather than bear the permanent mark of attending 1 year late, but I am still ever so worried for her. It is very possible that she will come off as inferior to the other Archduke candidates in many ways. Attending the Royal Academy 1 year late also meant graduating 1 year late, which in turn meant being recognized as an adult later than usual. Everyone would treat her harshly, and she would receive far fewer opportunities for marriage. With all that in mind, it was much better for one to attend the Royal Academy prematurely and attain worse grades than to wait. However, unlike Mother, I wasn't worried about Rosemine's grades. She had complained about the education Lord Wolfred was receiving right after her baptism, begun selling her own educational tools, and read through the Knight's Course entire syllabus before Angelica, although she claimed to have done it for Angelica's sake. It was hard to imagine first-year lessons posing any challenge to her whatsoever. I agree, it's just her socializing that is going to be very bad. That's what you're going to have to worry about. She's being educated by Lord Ferdinand, so I can't imagine she will encounter any problems in her written lessons. Considering her poor health, however, I am extremely worried about her practical ones, I said, and listed out all the things she had done in just a single year after her baptism. Mother fell into thought for a moment, then she gave a gentle smile. In that case, focus on her health above all else, and do all you can to ensure she finishes her first year safely. Of course, I won't let her be put in harm's way again. Her retainers will soon be selected, Mother said, but as this is being done in the same year she enters the Royal Academy, the decisions cannot be made among parents. Here, the Lies gangs will surely make their move. Keep a sharp eye on factions in the Royal Academy and report your findings to us. That, too, sounded like an enormous pain. I recalled how Hartman was aiming to be Rosemine's retainer and held back the urge to groan. We do not wish for Rosemine to become the next Mother continued, and neither does Rosemine herself. I only hope we can make the Lies gangs understand that. That's going to be difficult. They're stubborn. That burden is too great for me to bear, I said, stiffening as I thought over all the highly unique and strong-spirited nobles of the Lies gang faction. Mother gave a wry smile. Oh, but you need only work for Rosemine's sake. No? What makes you say that? I am your mother, Cornelius. I am well aware of how hard you have been working for the past 2 years. You have become an older brother of whom Rosemine can be proud. Her kind words sent a storm of pride, awkwardness, and joy rushing through my heart as I stepped onto the teleportation circle. I needed to wait while my luggage was taken to my room, and any final preparations were made. Lay nobles and men nobles apparently helped with this process, but I was leaving everything to my retainers, and instead went straight to the common room as I did every year. Hey, Cornelius, Hartman said as he made his way over. It's finally time for me to officially become Lady Rosemine's retainer. I can hardly believe it. The broad smile on his face practically oozed joy, or perhaps euphoria was a more accurate word. Either way, it was kind of gross to see. Creepy. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was happier now than he had ever been in his life. I was struck with the urge to turn around and leave the common room outright, but I stood my ground, not wanting to look like I was turning tail and running away. It's baffling. Hartman wasn't this much of a weirdo back when I first met him. Anyone would agree that he had always been the very embodiment of an archnoble, someone who skillfully carried out their job while keeping their emotions expertly hidden, and yet seeing Rosemine give that blessing during her baptism ceremony had shaken him to his core. He had wasted no time in asking his mother to let him become Rosemine's retainer at once. Thank the gods, Audley stopped him. Audley was already serving as Rosemine's attendant, so a recommendation from her would very likely have granted Hartman's wish. But this abrupt change in her son had come as too much of a surprise. She had asked him to wait a year for his emotions to settle, a very necessary decision, in my opinion, and one that I was particularly grateful for. Even after that year passed, however, the flames of Hartman's devotion burned just as bright. In fact, it seemed that having to wait 2 years while Rosemine was asleep had made his loyalty to her stronger still. Oh, she definitely won't have to worry about him betraying her. Hell, yeah, he'd be the one to defend her to the death. If it came down to it. Hartman, why are you so confident that you're going to be chosen, I asked. Audley might recommend you, but I certainly won't. He radiated the aura of someone who was going to be a huge pain in the neck, and as Rosemine's brother, I didn't want him anywhere near her. Too bad, she ends up picking him anyway. Hartman brushed off my glare and struck his chest with confidence. No matter what you say, Cornelius, I'll be chosen to become Lady Rosemine's retainer. I'm an archnoble honor student who's been probed about serving Lord Wolfred or Lady Charlotte countless times before, and my mother is already Lady Rosemine's attendant. All other worthwhile Ehrenfest nobles have been taken by the Archdukes of the Children, so I'll obviously be the first pick for Lady Rosemine's apprentice scholar. His confidence was more irritating than I could describe with words, but he was completely right. Most nobles of Rosemine's age had already been taken by Lord Wolfred or Lady Charlotte, so she didn't have many candidates left. It would make sense to pick Hartman on the grounds that he was Adelie's son alone, but he was also an honor student, and to most people, well, he was sociable. Only a select few knew what he was really like on the inside. So I'm gonna have to work with you, huh? I muttered. Can't say I'm too pleased about that. I wonder how best to spread the glory of the Saint of Ehrenfest to other duchies. Her achievements have been mostly hand-waved up to this point, but I expect everything to become a lot more believable once you see her in person. I can't wait. Please stop. It was unbearable. All throughout Rosemine's slumber, Hartman had gone on and on about the Saint of Ehrenfest, spreading the good word all throughout the Royal Academy. Now even the students of other duchies had started to tease me. Look, it's the Saint's brother, they would say. And now Hartman was suggesting that things were about to get worse. You know she's sickly, right, I said. Do you think a proper retainer should be putting that kind of burden on her? The most important thing for Rosemine right now is finishing her first year safely and without incident. As her guard knight, I'll stop you from causing her problems no matter what it takes. I'll make sure I'm careful, and that's what I'm doing here, that what I'm doing here doesn't cause her too much trouble, Hartman replied. He hadn't agreed to stop his antics entirely, but he did look a lot more thoughtful as he left the common room. Here's something he thinks on that. I kept a close eye on Hartman after that, and it turned out he wasn't just reveling in excitement for what was to come. Rather, he was positively dedicated to his studies, saying he needed grades suitable for a retainer serving Lady Rosemine. I decided that I, too, would do well to study a bit before Rosemine got here. I was simply reviewing the content rather than starting from scratch, since I had already learned a lot from Daniel while working in the Raise Angelica's grade squadron. I was only entering my 5th year at the academy, but it seemed safe to assume that I was knowledgeable enough to secure high grades even in the 6-year lessons. I wonder, hold on. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so they have 6 years at the Royal Academy. So next year is his last year. So, okay, so his second year, Rosemine's second year is his last year. Okay. I wonder how Angelica's going to do, though. Thoughts of her flashed through my mind. She had joined her fellow knights in gathering materials with the apprentice scholars and attendants almost every single day thus far, but now her Lady Rosemine was going to be here. There was a little point in me dwelling on Angelica, though. I wouldn't need to go through the trouble of convincing her to study, since Rosemine could just order her to. The first years were due to arrive at the Royal Academy today, and it was the job of the senior students to guide the wide-eyed newbies to the common room. Rosemine and Lord Wolfried were attending this year, so the apprentice attendants were working even harder than usual. Brunhilde's probably aiming to be Rosemine's retainer too. I know she had received training as the heir of the Guy Groschel, so she likely intended to form close bonds with the Archducal family and eventually marry a husband with whom she could manage her province. It was a certainty that her Liesgang faction family was giving her much advice. The first-year archnobles arrived while I was looking over the common room. Upon seeing him, I went straight to the teleportation hall with Angelica. Rosemine was due to come next. Welcome to the Royal Academy, Lady Rosemine. Once Rosemine had entered the common room, those serving Lord Wolfried promptly left to welcome him. As we guard knights invited Rosemine to the seat prepared for her, I stayed attentive to make sure nobody came too close. I got the impression that those who wished to be her retainer were buzzing around nearby, trying to find a way to get in her good graces. Strangely enough, Hartman wasn't among them, despite so passionately wishing to join her service. Just what in the world is he doing? I glanced around the room suspicious and saw him staring in our direction with an overwhelmingly confident grin. His cockiness irritated me, but my attention was almost immediately drawn elsewhere as Rosemine expressed a sudden interest in the children of the former Veronica faction. I made sure to explain the role factions played as clearly as I could, but even then she didn't seem very convinced. I wanted to cradle my head in agony. Please, not this. I'll take Hartman over those children any day. Maybe she simply didn't understand that the former Veronica faction was responsible for her 2-year coma? No, she had to know that. Lord Ferdinand had surely drilled such knowledge into her head, but why then did she want to take them as her retainers anyway? I just didn't understand what she was thinking. As I saw Rosemine off to her room, unable to accompany her due to being a man, I couldn't help but grit my teeth. I'm sure Riarda will expertly convince her against this, but I'm still worried. I was in my room planning for Angelica's studies, reviewing Eckert's documents, and going over the schedule Daniel had prepared for her when Riarda came to tell me about the retainer candidates. We've narrowed them down, she said. Do probe the male retainers for us, Cornelius. You want me to do that? Indeed, that would normally be the job of an apprentice scholar, but Milady does not yet have one. In an ideal world, we would also have Angelica inform the female candidates, but the very idea of trusting her with a message is terrifying. Instead, I will handle it myself. I understand how Riarda felt all too well. The idea terrified me too. Nobody could predict what kind of slip-up she might incur. For apprentice knights, we intend to probe Lenore, Traga, and Judith, Riarda continued. For apprentice attendants, Laisletta and Brunhilde, and for apprentice scholars, Hartmut and Feline. I guess there was no avoiding Hartmut. Of course, he is utterly stunned and especially skilled. Milady is also set on taking Feline as a retainer, and she will need an arch scholar to look after her. It was clear that Riarda was against Rosemine taking Feline into her service, and for good reason. No normal member of the Archducal family would willingly accept a monosparse lay noble as their retainer. It was for the same reason that people wondered why Rosemine showed no interest of dismissing Daniel. Well, no intention of dismissing Daniel. Well, of course not. She's one of the few people that she still has in her life that knows about her commoner origins. She trusts him with her life, and he's already started learning the mana compression method, so he's going to get a lot more mana. No, he's already gotten a lot more mana, sorry. This is after her 2-year sleep. I expect that Feline will become the target of much envy due to her status, Riarda explained. And she will find a tremendous burden placed on her as a result. To make matters worse, unlike Daniel, who was ordered to visit the temple as punishment, and only then receive praise for his work after, she will have no defense. Do you believe this is something she will be able to endure? I am most concerned that Milady is on the verge of ruining this young girl's life. I can't deny that Feline is going to struggle, but even if she doesn't become Rosemine's retainer, she has already sworn loyalty to her. I trust that she can handle it. She had been extremely moved by all the praise Rosemine had showered upon her for the stories she had gathered over the past 2 years. And the memory of when she had sworn loyalty to Rosemine in the playroom was still fresh in my mind. Most of the requests must have been from Lies gangs, right? I'm glad to see this selection isn't as biased toward them as I expected. Lady Elvira asked that we aim for as many neutral nobles as possible. Traga was included at his own request. Traga, huh? I've known him since we were little kids, but we've never been good friends. Not sure that things are going to go well with him. Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea. Traga was Boniface's grandson. He was always hostile toward me, maybe because we were almost the same age, and I could see working with him becoming something of a chore if that continued. Surely he wouldn't bring those kinds of personal feelings to the workplace, though. I would be wrong about that one. So, he didn't choose to serve Lord Wilfrid, huh? I asked. I heard that Lady Gudrun served Lady Georgine before she got married. Trogut's closer to the Woman Veronica faction, and he seemed to get along with Wilfrid in the Winter Playroom, so I was sure he'd go for him. Trogut's mother, Gudrun, was Riarda's daughter. They were more attached to the Archducal family than they were to the Lies gangs, so despite being neutral, he was still close to the former Veronica faction. If you want to look at it like that, Riarda said, you should know that I've served Lady Veronica, Lady Georgine, and Lord Cardston in the past. Wait, father too? That's right, I've never considered myself as belonging to any particular faction, though. My family has always served the Archducal family, and my loyalty lies with Ehrenfest. I am a neutral archnoble who serves whomever the Ob orders me to. Riarda was similarly serving Rosemine at the Archduke's orders. Maybe it was safe to interpret her here less as a loyal retainer and more as a loyal servant of the Ob. Tragut should serve faithfully once he has the Lord or Lady, Riarda continued. We have always supported Ehrenfest under the Archducal family. I was trained and educated to this end, and I trust that Trogut's parents trained and educated him in the same way. Oh, you've been wrong about that. If they did, it didn't get through. Once her explanation was complete, Riarda left to carry out her duties. I needed to inform Hartman and Tragut that they had been chosen, and so I called them to my room via ordinance. Hartman, Tragut, you're being asked to become Lady Rosemine's retainers. I told them once they arrived. Not only was she raised in the temple, but she has also spent 2 long years asleep in a Jareve, so she presumably has many shortcomings that other Archduke candidates do not. Will you be able to serve her nonetheless? Well, Hartman, obviously. I will serve her well and in all sincerity, they both replied. Yeah, right. Hartman's expression was one of uncontrollable joy, while Tragut looked deadly serious. Yeah, right. He's only there for his own gain. Friggin' jerk. Life as a guard knight in the Royal Academy seemed to be going well. Daniel wasn't here to offer his opinions on scheduling and the like, but I was fortunate enough to have Lenore with me, and we were figuring things out together. Lady Rosamund has far fewer guard knights than Lord Wolfried, I said. Keeping up shifts is going to be a struggle until everyone's finished their classes. I was starting to believe I would need to do it all on my own, but Lenore eased my worries with a gentle smile. I believe we will manage, she replied. I expect to pass the majority of my written lessons on the first day. That'd be a big help. After tutoring Angelica so much, I'm pretty sure I'll pass all of mine on the first day too. Oh, definitely. You've had to deal over all that stuff. The two of us working together would make things much easier. Traugott was an archnoble, meaning he had presumably studied enough to secure good grades, so I expected that he would join us soon as well. The problem is Judith, I noted. This certainly was sudden for her. In the long term, I think it would be better for her to prioritize her education and try to attain the highest grade she can than to hurry to begin guard duty. We can assign her to guarding Lady Rosamund when she is in her room and elsewhere in the dormitory. It was extremely heartening to have Lenore here with me, since only girls were allowed in the Rosamund's room, and Angelica couldn't be relied on for pretty much anything. Angelica had recommended Lenore, though, so I suppose that was something to thank her for. Giselle was beginning to think we could manage with the few guard knights available to us. Lord Wolfried made a remark he really shouldn't have. Something inside Rosamund seemed to snap, and she began a full-speed charge toward the library. Oh, no. Here we go. As an apology for my little sister going on a rampage when told to have all the first years pass their written lessons on the first day, I felt the need to protect Feline as much as I could. Scheduling everyone's guard duty was unfathomably easier than stopping that obsessive book lover. For the most part, Rosamund was oblivious to our struggles and focused instead on passing all of her classes on the first day. It seemed as though she was being stubborn to prove a point, but also like she was in a bit of a panic, as if she expected the library to be snatched away from her if she didn't act fast enough. As she barreled through her studies, she also managed to outrage Professor Frollarm in her Hybe's class, and ended up having an exchange with Prince Anastasius during her Dedication World class. She was moving from one dangerous predicament to another, but as far as her grades were concerned, there was absolutely nothing to worry about. She was passing her classes one after another. What? You want to go to the library alone? I exclaimed. Don't be ridiculous. Rosamund had asked to venture to the library by herself after finally completing her classes and learning from the mistakes she had made when communicating with Professor Solange. I had ended up responding to her as her brother rather than her guard knight, but since we were in the dormitory, nobody seemed to take issue. But, I would feel bad forcing any of you to accompany me when you haven't finished your classes yet, she said. If you feel bad, how about just not going? That simply isn't an option. I came to the Royal Academy solely to visit the library, and Ferdinand gave me permission to go there at the moment all of my classes were done. Oh, boy. My little sister couldn't be swayed when it came to the library. That much I already knew. She had been the same way before her baptism, when I once suggested rewarding her progress in her studies with a trip to our family estate's Bookworm. She had gotten so excited that she passed out on the way there. She had awakened the next morning with a terrible fever, but even then she had thrown herself down onto the floor and tried to crawl to the bookroom. In our current situation, there was no way I could stop her from going to the Royal Academy Library when she had permission from both Lord Wolfried and Lord Ferdinand. Archduke candidates need to have retainers with them, I said. I understand that you're trying to be considerate, but acting alone as you're suggesting will only trouble us even more. Do you still not understand this even after the attack 2 years ago? But you have your classes. That's why you have several retainers and why we're scheduling your library visits for when we don't need to attend our lessons. If you want to be mindful of your retainers, don't ever go off on your own. We'll all be beside ourselves with worry, fearful that something might happen. Rosamund wilted and said, Sorry, Cornelius. It seemed that she was more prone to accepting my advice when I gave her a scolding as her brother, rather than when I tried to politely explain things as her guard knight. I took the lesson to heart, and from that point onward, I spoke to her as family while we were in the dormitory, when the situation allowed for it, of course. It was a relief to know that Rosamund wouldn't be acting alone, but day after day, the situation changed. There came a tea party in the library, another with the music professors, a summons from royalty. My hands were full just trying to keep up with the slew of developments. Now I understood all too well what Eckert had meant when he said that the more loyal a guard knight was, the harder they would find things in the Royal Academy. During the 2 years Rosamund had slept, I had striven to become worthy of serving her. I had trained hard and raised my grades until I was sure that this time I could protect her. But her demand surpassed everything I could have expected. Worse still, before I could even find my footing with this Rosemine situation, I found myself serving as an intermediary between Lord Wilfrid and the Lice gangs. Lampert had asked me to take on this role. He had said that Lord Wilfrid considered himself part of the same faction as the Abb and Lady Florencia, but that ever since the Ivory Tower incident, the other nobles in the duchy had stopped seeing things that way. Me looking after another Archduke candidate? How can I do that? My hands are full serving Lady Rosemine. As much as I wanted to scream, both father and mother had said that since Rosemine didn't intend to become the next Abb, I needed to prop up Lord Wilfrid as best I could. To be honest, though, with Rosemine being such an absurd child prodigy, it was only a matter of time before people began pushing for her to take the seat instead. Hartman was already running around in the shadows, pulling strings and doing who knows what else. Not that I had the time or energy to stop him. Wait a minute. I just realized something terrible. Rosemine had only woken from her bereave this year. In other words, she had managed to start a library-inspired rampage and was leading the Ehrenfest dormitory by order of the Abb, while she was still unwell. She wasn't even acting in her full capacity. There's been so much chaos already, and she can barely even move. How bad are things going to be next year when she's actually recovered a bit more? Oh no. Oh no. Poor Cornelius. I feel so bad for him. My head throbbed at the very thought, but there was nothing for me to gain from dwelling on the future. I didn't have the time for it. Anyway, instead I simply followed my eagerly grinning little sister to the library, all the while trying to work out whom I could ask to handle guard duty tomorrow. Dang, there's 262 pages of this. Dear Lord. How long have I been recording for? 32 minutes. Okay. Roderick, one day in the Royal Academy. Farewell, everyone, Rosemine said, seeing us off to our classes as she always did. She spotted Felina and me among the leaving senior students and gave a warm smile. You two have geography today, I believe. Pay close attention to your professors. Felina and I had narrowly passed our history and geography exams, but only after tearfully begging our professors to let us. They had eventually conceded, but only on the condition that we alone, out of all the first years, start attending their lessons. The classes had only half as many students as when we had taken the exams, namely because the Archnoble and Archduke candidates of other duchies were passing in droves. That left only the lay noble and men nobles, which made things feel particularly sparse. I entered the class, then blinked in surprise. The students were all gathered at the front for some reason, which made it seem as though there were more people in attendance than usual. Are we in the wrong room? Did something happen, I wonder, Felina asked, looking similarly uneasy as she eyed our surroundings. A girl in a light blue cape must have overheard as she was passing by because she stopped and turned to us. Now that all the Archnoble and Archduke candidates had passed, they must have changed the seating arrangement, she said. My older sister told me this would happen. Oh, okay. The students from other duchies had already been told about this by their seniors, so they weren't as uncertain, but we weren't as lucky. We'd only been studying with others from our grade, and since we first years had passed all at once, the older students hadn't thought this kind of thing was necessary to mention. I thank you ever so much. I was feeling quite uneasy, Felina replied, and with that we began searching for our new seats. It seemed they were numbered according to the duchy rankings. Here, these are the 13th, I said. There were 2 chairs at the very center of one row, right between the 12s and the 14ths. Up until now, the students of each duchy had sat together and away from the other duchies, but now the students all moved to fill the gaps. I feel a little tense sitting next to students of other duchies, Felina muttered, hugging her belongings to her chest. I shrugged and set my things on the chair next to a seat labeled 12. It can't be any worse than sitting next to high-ranking students from our own duchy. During the hunting tournament 2 years ago, I had followed my father's instructions and played with Wilfrid, only to end up committing an unforgivable crime. Ever since then, the friends I had once spent time with had started calling me a traitor to the archducal family, and everyone looked at me with cold eyes, even those of my own faction. Lady Rosemine's terrifying proclamation that all first years would need to pass their written lessons on the first day had made me tremble with fear, but the ensuing struggle had formed tight-knit bonds between us. Now I was no longer being ostracized, not to mention students from the other duchies didn't know how I was treated at home. It was much easier being in class with them than being in the dormitory. Lord Roderick, Felina said in a hushed voice, sitting in a chair next to one labeled 14. You've been going to the library on the same days as Lady Rosemine, have you not? Entirely as if you were serving her. This is just, a thought. But is it possible that you feel as uncomfortable in the dormitory as you did in the playroom last year? Would you like for me to speak with Lady Rosemine about it? Refusing her would mean being stuck in my current situation, but who knew what kind of information would leak to the former Veronica faction if I agreed? Neither was a good response. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. I used the more distant carols, so as long as nobody stops me from going there, there's nothing to worry about. I'm writing a story for Lady Rosemine right now, so... Feline seemed to guess my intentions. Lady Rosemine will surely rejoice, she whispered, her eyes cast downward in a forlorn look that I could only half see. It was probably because she was the only one to have been chosen as Lady Rosemine's retainer, despite us both having written and gathered stories in the playroom. I must ask, though, what will you do when she is sent home for the dedication ritual, Lord Wardrick? A shiver ran down my spine. It was like someone had seized me by the heart. So long as I went to the library at the same time as Lady Rosemine, nobody would bother me, and I could spend my time there in peace. I hadn't even considered what might happen when she left. Who knows, I said. I'll think about it when it happens. The truth is, I've been dwelling on the same thing. I'm safe now that Lady Rosemine's here, but people still envy and feel vengeful toward me. I couldn't help but recoil, well aware that even I had shared in those spiteful thoughts about her, about how she was receiving such special treatment despite only being a lay noble. Feline must have sensed that, even though it remained unspoken. Such strong feelings of malice were sickeningly easy to detect, but even with that in mind, my frustration about her getting to be Lady Rosemine's retainer didn't fade. I don't think you'll need to worry with Lord Hartmut here, I said. At least you have someone to protect you. No sooner had the words escaped me than I pressed my lips together, conscious that my tone had sounded unnecessarily sharp. Before I could say anything, however, a hand reached out for the chair next to Feline, and a purple cape caught my eye. Excuse me, the new arrival said. I am Anselm of Birchman, pleased to meet you. I am Feline of Ehrenfest, pleased to meet you as well. Taking the seat beside Feline was a boy from, Birchman the 14th. I had seen him before during my practical lessons, so he was most likely a men noble. I made sure to introduce myself as well, not wanting him to make any unreasonable demands of a lay noble like Feline. I am Roderick of Ehrenfest, pleased to meet you. The student beside Anselm, as well as the next student after that, were shooting us glances. The closer one then poked Anselm, whatever, and asked him something, or perhaps urged him to gather some intelligence from us. Younger students were told time and time again by their seniors to never be rude to the duchies ranked above them. Of course, those older students were used to operating within the bounds of the duchy rankings, but this was a tense time for first years who had not yet begun socializing. My circumstances made me an easy fall guy, someone Ehrenfest could dispose of without hesitation, so I was often thrust to the forefront of social situations. I could empathize with Anselm's situation as a result, so I decided to break the ice. Then again, as we have already shared practical lessons, Lord Anselm, it hardly feels like a first meeting at all. Anselm and Feline relaxed at my response. They had both been uncertain about how to respond to the situation. Indeed, Anselm said, if you don't mind me asking, since all of your duchy's first years passed their exams on the first day, how have they been spending the time they would have been spent in class? Excuse me? I asked and exchanged a look at Feline. We couldn't understand what he was trying to say. Anselm hastily elaborated. Other duchies are still attending classes, so they can't socialize, right? And as first years, they can't yet brew or train. So I was curious to know what your duchy's first years are doing right now, as nothing comes to mind. Is it fun to have more free time? Now that he mentioned it, there certainly was little we could do in the dormitory. I really had no idea how to answer him. We had all been told to keep matters related to the Better Grades Committee a secret from other duchies. We study, I suppose, Feline answered, eyeing me for my reaction. Even without lessons to attend, we do the work that Lady Rosemine assigns us. As other duchies are still going to their classes, we have been told to stay in the dormitory for now unless we have very important extenuating circumstances. I nodded. It was a fair enough response. We have 2 first-year Archduke candidates, but their older retainers haven't finished their lessons yet. We've thus been told not to leave our dormitory during classes unless we are with one of said candidates. In truth, Lady Rosemine was going to the library every day, and so was I, for that matter. My statement to Anselm wasn't entirely untrue, though, because Wilfred was still waiting for his retainers to finish and was therefore unable to leave the dormitory freely. To be precise, we were spending our time reading second-year study guides in the common room and making new textbooks of our own, but that was top secret. Ah, I see, Anselm replied. I suppose it's not especially rewarding to have passed on the first day then. The truth is, in Bersham, we've been instructed to ensure our grades are not below yours. The student beside him added, we thought we could motivate ourselves by learning what the Ehrenfest first years do with their free time, but it seems there is little to be excited about. Anselm nodded. It certainly is hard for us, lesser nobles, being wrapped up in the orders of Archduke candidates. I didn't quite agree. Although it was true that my heart had frozen when we first years were in order to pass in one go, Lady Rosamund had prepared all the resources and strategies necessary to make it happen. After all that, plus how much I had learned from watching the Archducal musicians play Harpspiel, I was more thankful for Archduke candidates than anything. Lady Rosamund does not... Feline began looking a bit annoyed at the Bersham students. I understood not wanting to hear one's lord or lady be criticized, no matter how indirectly, but she was speaking to a men noble. As someone of a lower status, it was better for her to say nothing at all. I gave Feline a gentle prod on the arm and turned to Anselm. Keeping up really can be a struggle, but there is much to gain from doing Crest-certified work. Isn't that right, Feline? What? Oh, of course. If we could transcribe the books not currently available in our castle's library, Lady Rosamund graciously buys them from us. Those from other duchies interested in Ehrenfest's Crest-certified work may ask for details and participate as well. Crest-certified work? In the Royal Academy, referring to the job students could take on to earn money, and it was named after after the order forms used to ensure payments were received. These forms could contain our names, crests, and a description of the job in question. Anyone who didn't receive the agreed compensation could petition the Ob about it during the interduchy tournament. All the students left in class were nobles who couldn't afford to spend much time on their studies, unlike archnobles and archduke candidates, so they were very open to the allure of crest-certified work. First years in particular couldn't make rejuvenation potions to sell the apprentice knights, nor could they risk going to their gathering spot to collect materials for apprentice scholars. A job where all one needed to do was write was very appealing indeed. Once we finish several of our classes and are afforded more free time, we will make sure to inquire, one of the Birchman students said, and with that our class began. History and geography classes were very easy to understand when we could reference Lady Rosamund's prepared materials and worksheets during the professor's lectures. Her study guides were more neatly put together than anything I was capable of. At a glance, all the more important details were clear to see. I'm sure Lady Rosamund's study guides would sell more copies than any other. Her writing was the example I strove to reach myself. During my first year in the winter playroom, I had racked my brain for a story to tell so I could borrow some playing cards. Then, during my second year, I borrowed the newly made book containing my story and transcribed it all into wooden boards. It was far too expensive for me to buy outright, so I had worked my hardest to copy it all down and memorize it. And yet, even after working so closely with the text, it was only recently that I came to understand how much she had improved on my own telling of the story. Her writing was so clear and smooth, and no matter how much I tried to replicate it with writing my own stories, I didn't really know where I was messing up or what to change. If only Lady Rosamund and I were in the same faction, then I could just ask her for assistance. I already knew that Lady Rosamund would readily agree to help me, but her retainers and Lord Wolfrid were vehemently against me going anywhere near her. I couldn't risk trying. Written lessons ended at 4th bell, and we returned to the dormitory for lunch. Our practical lessons for mana usage would start in the afternoon, and for those men nobles were divided into 2 classes. One that contained the 1st to 6th ranked duchies, and the other that contained the rest. This was done because greater duchies had such large populations, but it inadvertently made it harder for those of us from the lower-ranked duchies to forge connections with the greater duchies during class. Today I will excel at removing mana from face stones, Lady Katinka declared. That much I can assure you. I could push mana into a face stone without issue, but pulling it back out is so much harder, Lord Elias agreed with a nod. Lady Katinka and Lord Elias were both neutral men nobles in Ehrenfest. In the past, their houses had appeared to loyally serve Lady Veronica, but after Lady Rosamund's baptism, they had started warming up to Lasgang nobles instead. This had lasted until Lady Rosamund entered her long slumber, at which point they had started distancing themselves somewhat. From my perspective, as someone whose father had crossed an exceedingly dangerous bridge and caused a great deal of chaos, in an attempt to butter up his faction superiors, their houses were behaving expertly as neutral men nobles. As I followed 2 steps behind them, I resolved to perfect getting mana into face stones during this lesson. That was easier said than done, though, considering that I was so short of mana. In truth, I was closer to a lay noble than an average men noble. The professors brought us low-quality face stones that had previously been used by the archnoble and archduke candidates, which meant they were still slight vestiges of their mana inside them. We had to overwhelm that mana with our own, but again, this was easier said than done for me. I struggle enough trying to remove my mana around at will, so... The magic tools given to us at birth had sucked out our excessive mana automatically, meaning we didn't need to move it on our own. I knew what it felt like for mana to flow into the tool, and I knew when I needed to move it the same way, but actually doing it was another matter entirely. The archnobles and archduke candidates had apparently managed it in one go during their class, but it really didn't seem that easy to me. Ugh. Once again, I clenched the tiny face stone and tried to pour my mana into it. Controlling the flow had become a little easier since getting my stamp, but even then, the task before me was beyond daunting. I cried out despite myself as an explosive burst rushed through my hands. The mana I was trying to build up had scattered, and my failure brought with it a flood of exhaustion. Perhaps the student who used that face stone before you had exceptionally strong mana, Lord Elias said. Might I suggest asking Professor Herscher for an exchange? An exchange, I repeated, looking down at the clear face stone. It feels to me that some face stones are easier to use than others. This was my third practical spent trying to dye a face stone. Each attempt had ended up in failure, so they had all seemed equally impossible to me. But I really believed the issue was with my own skill. Even so, Lord Elias had gone to the trouble of giving me advice, so I decided to at least humor the idea. Professor Herscher, may I exchange this face stone for another? I asked. You should be able to dye any face stone of this size, but as this is a practice rather than a test, I shall allow it. I gather that you've realized not all stones require the same amount of effort to dye, Herscher replied, and pushed a box filled with them toward me. Of course I hadn't realized anything myself. I was only here because of someone else's advice, but at least she had provided some confirmation. That said, I can't tell which ones are meant to be easier. The face stones were all equally transparent. I think Professor Herscher took one at random, and then went back to my seat. Oh? This stone was easier to dye than the other one. Nice! It was a slow process, but I could feel my mana steadily going into it. There was some resistance, but not enough to cause my mana to burst again, so I tightened my grip and desperately continued to pour. Eventually, light started to shine through the crevices of my fingers. Oh my, Lord Roderick, it appears you've succeeded, Lady Katinka said, and I opened my fingers with timid disbelief. The once clear face stone was now dyed a yellowish orange, the color of my mana. I actually did it, I muttered. But, well, unlike your face stones, there's still bits of the other person's mana floating in mine, so it's not a complete success. You will need more practice, but you should not disregard your achievement, Lord Elias said, praising me. Nice, you're getting some allies here. Maybe, or at least somewhat. Indeed, Lady Katinka added, and your task is not yet over, Lord Roderick. Now you must remove your mana. I was glad that we could talk like this, even if only during class. Had I been of a different faction, perhaps these conversations would have been the norm for me. Praise be to Lady Rosemine, who formed the Better Grades Committee. I was already familiar with the flow of mana leaving my body, even if only through my mana being sucked out on its own, but I had no experience with drawing it back into me. I stared at the face stone questioningly and rolled it around in my palm, unsure of where to even begin, and before I knew it, our lesson was over. The professor would take care of any stones that still contained mana, apparently, so I put mine back in the box and exited the classroom. After dinner, we took turns bathing. I was of a lower status than everyone else in my room, so I always went last. I could spend that time either reading boards or writing my story. And as I made my way out of the dining hall, contemplating which to choose, Feline came to speak to me. Lord Roderick, I will not be attending history tomorrow. It seems our schedule cannot be changed to avoid my absence. According to Feline, Lady Rosemine's retainers were forming a schedule based around their classes to ensure someone was always available to accompany her to the library. Feline was taking history and geography with me, but she would sometimes need to miss class for this reason. She looked apologetic about it, but also proud to be accompanying Lady Rosemine, which was somewhat irritating. That makes sense, I replied. Your retainer work is more important, and you have already passed the class, so yeah. My words failed me. Lord Hartman and Lord Cornelius were more or less glaring at me as I spoke to Feline. She was just a lay noble, but her retainer co-worker still treated her as so well. I was jealous beyond words. Every time I was reminded just how different our situations were, I couldn't help but get endlessly frustrated. If only Lady Rosemine and I were in the same faction, then I wouldn't have these feelings in the first place. I was getting annoyed at Feline, even though she hadn't done anything wrong, which in turn made me more annoyed at myself. As much as I didn't want to feel this way, these negative emotions that were swelling up inside me showed no signs of calming down. It didn't make sense to me either, and I was just praying that I could swallow down my envy for long enough to change my blackening heart. I wish taking a bath cleansed the spirit as well. That would be nice. Once it was my turn to bathe, I entrusted my body to the hot water. Much to my surprise, it felt as though the dark feeling stirring inside me started to dissolve, if only a little. And the feeling of my attendant Kashmir massaging my scalp did wonders to wash away my frustration. Kashmir, do you know how to get people of other factions to trust you? I asked. He was family on my mother's side and treated me well, perhaps because he was displeased about how my father acted. He was the one who advised me to use the library when I needed to escape from the struggles in the dormitory. Those of other factions, you say, Kashmir said, looking highly troubled. It certainly wasn't a problematic question to be asked out of nowhere. So I attempted to backpedal. One didn't want to trouble one's attendant without reason. It doesn't matter. If not, I guess if such a way existed, everyone would already be using it. Obviously, there was no means by which I could get Lady Rosemine to trust me. I was feeling even more glum, having raised, and then immediately dashed my own hopes, but then Kashmir hesitantly spoke. There may be one way. Really? Please keep still. I need to wash the bubbles from your hair. His response had shocked me into sitting up, so I obediently lay back down. He exhaled as he poured some hot water over my head. As I understand it, the highly trustful Lady Veronica demanded that nobles carry out some particular procedure to earn her trust. I do not know the details, unfortunately, but it does exist. Oh, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about the name swearing. Oh, no. Here we go. Yes, I know about the name swearing. I looked it up and got some details. I know who some people are who are named sworn to other people. I know that Ferdinand's got a couple of those. I know Rosemine gets some of those, but that's a little bit later. But this is the first mentioning of it. It seemed that this hesitation in answering had come from how little he actually knew about this ritual, but even so, I felt better just knowing there's a way. Thanks, Kashmir. No need to thank me. I merely hope that more light may one day shine on your life here in the Royal Academy, Lord Roderick. Although I hadn't learned anything too meaningful from our conversation, Kashmir was trying his best to help me, and that alone seemed to put me at ease. I wonder if I'll ever earn Lady Rosemine's trust. I decided that upon returning to Ehrenfest, I would start looking into the procedure that Kashmir had mentioned. The one that Lady Veronica had required, all of those hoping to earn her trust. I carved that resolve into my heart so that I would never forget. Oh, here we go. This is what led to the dinner thing. But that will have to wait until next time. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you all on the next one.